Ambassador, you were just in Ukraine. What is the status of this war and Ukraine's counteroffensive 16 months since the start of this invasion?
Well, Moscow has failed time after time to achieve its objectives. First, to seize Kiev and decapitate the government in February of last year, then to take all of the Donbass in the summer of last year, and then their offensive this year, which is supposed to at least take all the Donbass, and they failed. All they seized was the city of Bakhmut, which is now again in play as Ukraine has launched the very beginnings of its counteroffensive. We know that Ukraine had a successful counteroffensive last summer and fall. They took back over 50% of all the land that Moscow seized in its initial offensive, beginning in February of last year. And they are now doing probes, some people might call it armed reconnaissance, to see which are the weakest spots of the line, the Russian defensive fortifications that they've been building since January of this year.
So, Ambassador, what is the Ukrainian strategy moving forward? I know you've just met with the country's top leadership. Where to from here?
There's a lot of speculation that they will strike in the south, precisely the area that was flooded by this dam. That flooding makes it much harder for them to strike there. But I've thought all along they will carefully weigh Russian defenses, and they will strike in the spot anywhere along the 1,200-kilometer active front where they have the greatest possibility of success. So while the most spectacular gains could be had in the south, for reasons I can explain, if they find it easier to make big gains in the east or the north, that's what they'll do.
So the focus moves to the south. When it comes to this situation around the dam, Ukrainians say its destruction is a, quote, environmental bomb of mass destruction. Russians deny they're behind the flooding, though. So how significant is this?
Well, it's normal that both sides would claim the other was responsible for this humanitarian and ecological disaster. What we do know is that apparently this was done by an explosion from the inside, which would be much easier for the Russians to do because they occupied it when this happened. And of course, if the Ukrainians destroyed it via missile or artillery, there'd be video showing it. But the U.S. has been very cautious, and they have yet to reach a conclusion about this as to who ultimately was responsible. But if you do a cui bono analysis, who gains? Again, this is the area where Ukrainian troops would strike to head to the south, which is the most would be the most decisive move for their counteroffensive. So that too would point towards Moscow.